The sirens wailed in pulses of ultraviolet and red as the medical ship Althea tumbled to the shattered remains of asteroid HXN-77. Dr. Unia Kale, bent over a trauma bed, didn't flinch at the echoing screams or the flickering lights. Her gloved hands were steady, clamping a vascular sealant over the ruptured chest cavity of a young patient, a miner caught in the blast. This wasn't her first triage under fire. Vitals flatlining. The ship's AI barked in her earpiece. "Not yet," Unia muttered. With a practice motion, she slammed a cortical stim pack into the patient's temple. The body convulsed, then steadied. A faint pulse flickered back to life. Unia allowed herself one breath before reaching for the next tool. Then everything stopped. Not the noise, not the chaos, but her body, frozen mid-motion as gravity inverted, and a surge of unseen force tore through the hull. The floor buckled, lights exploded in a blinding blue, and the atmosphere was sucked into silence. Darkness fell like a dropped curtain. She woke up restrained, her head throbbing in rhythmic waves. Cold metal pressed against her spine, and a metallic taste filled her mouth. Unia's vision adjusted to a chamber not meant for humans. Angular architecture, humming conduits, and glyphs glowing in a language she didn't know. Her wrists and ankles were bound to an upright table. An unseen presence moved beyond her peripheral vision. Designation, Unia Kale. Medical officer. Human class. A voice rasped, deep, modulated, and alien. Confirmed. A figure stepped forward. He was tall, sinewy, armored in plates that shimmered like living crystal. His eyes, unblinking pools of starlight, examined her without warmth. "General Zarn, you are not dead," he said. "This pleases me." Unia spat blood onto the floor. "You'll forgive me if I don't return the sentiment." He tilted his head. "Your defiance is inefficient. You will serve." "I'm a medic, not a soldier." "Falsehood. You are a tool. Tools are repurposed." Her mouth went dry. She had heard rumors of captured humans used as experiments or labor, of surgeons turned into biological weapon engineers. Unia looked around the chamber. Medical instruments, some familiar, many terrifyingly foreign, lined the walls. "Why me?" she asked, her voice raw. "Because you saved life during your ship's death. Because your hands did not hesitate. Because the Dominion has wounded, and you will make them fight again." He turned and walked away. The restraints hissed and released. Unia collapsed to the floor, gasping. She didn't stay there long. Over the next hours or days, time was difficult to measure. She was led to a facility buried in asteroid stone, surrounded by alien soldiers of all types. Scaled, cybernetic, luminescent. She was shown a ward filled with the wounded, limbs torn, organs exposed, fluids leaking in grotesque colors. The technology available was advanced but impersonal, incapable of intuition. The staff were efficient but lacked understanding of trauma's nuance. They could replace a heart but not restart it. They could mend bone but not realign it for balance. Unia saw their failure, and they saw hers. If she didn't heal, she would be repurposed into something far worse. Her first patient was a Threxian shock trooper, 7 feet tall, tusked, his abdominal cavity crushed inward like wet paper. The Dominion staff had already given up. Unia demanded a stabilizer. When none came, she fashioned a makeshift pressure rig from cables and foam sealant. She had no translator, only instinct and anatomy. The trooper screamed under her touch, but she worked faster. He lived. Her second patient died on the table, arterial spray soaking into her sleeves. She didn't cry. She couldn't afford to. Word spread. The human could save what even the machines couldn't. She used pain as a scalpel and made enemies fear her touch. Not because it killed, but because it wouldn't let them die. One night, while cleaning her instruments, a new figure entered the med bay. Blue light rippled across his crystalline armor, frost forming on the metal as he passed. He didn't speak. He only watched. Unia glanced up. "You're either here to intimidate me or bleed on my table." The ice-armored figure stepped closer. His voice, when it came, was calm. "I have heard you stitched a Threxian stomach using only fiber cord and surgical glue. I didn't exactly have a stock trauma kit." He nodded once. I want you to repair me. She studied him. Beneath the armor, faint fractures glowed under the skin, like a cracked energy core. You're dying, she said, slowly, probably leaking radiation into your bloodstream. Every minute you delay makes it worse. I know, but I didn't want Dominion tech. I waited for you. Despite herself, Unia felt something unfamiliar. Respect. She worked on him in silence. His physiology was unlike anything she had seen, but the principles were universal. Isolate, remove, repair. Hours passed. Her hands moved like ghosts, and when she was done, his glow had steadied. Your name? She asked. Varnak. Try not to die. I don't like repeating work. He nodded again and left, but Unia knew he'd be back. She was given quarters, barely more than a cell, and allowed limited movement. Her reputation grew. Patients began to request her by name. Some saluted her. Others bowed. She hated the reverence. It meant they believed she belonged. One evening, General Zarn visited her personally. He stood at the doorway, arms behind his back. You saved Varnak. He saved himself by asking. You understand now why we captured you? Unia stood, shoulders squared. You think this makes me loyal? It doesn't. Zarn's expression didn't change. Loyalty is irrelevant. Output is measurable. She stepped closer. I'm not your tool. No, he said. You are your own weapon, but you still serve. He turned and left, leaving the silence thick behind him. Unia stared at her hands. They were stained with fluids from 6 species, shaking slightly from exhaustion. But somewhere, deep beneath the ache, burned a decision. She would heal them, not for the Dominion, not for peace, not even for the lives on her table. She would heal because power disguised as mercy was still power. And if they feared her for what she could do with a scalpel, perhaps one day they'd fear her enough to listen. The war was far from over, but she had just arrived. The clinic assigned to Unia Kale was located in the underbelly of the Dominion dreadnought Salaxus Prime, a vessel the size of a moon and colder than its outer hull. It was nothing like the sterile, orderly med bays she'd trained in. Here, antiseptics battled the stench of scorched flesh and alien rot. Patients screamed in tones that human ears weren't designed to interpret. Monitors blinked in unreadable scripts. Each breath carried the threat of infection or insight. The Dominion didn't run hospitals. They ran repair stations for living weapons. Unia stood at the threshold of her new ward, flanked by 2 guards with chrome-laced skin and plasma bayonets for arms. Inside, a dozen patients lay on slab-like beds, some unconscious, some moaning, a few alert enough to flinch at her presence. At the far wall, a massive vat bubbled with some sort of regenerative gel, and overhead, a mechanical arm twitched sporadically, malfunctioning in the middle of a half-finished operation. This is what you've given me? Unia asked without turning. The guard on her right gave no reply. She moved through the space slowly, absorbing the dimensions of her prison. Each patient was tagged with a holoband. Vital signs pulsed in bursts of color. There were Threxians like the one she'd saved before, but also smaller, insectoid species with delicate carapaces, and a hulking cybernetic brute whose breathing was a harsh rasp through rusted filters. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were broken machinery. Unia set her case down on a metal cart and snapped open the latches. Inside, salvage tools gleamed, some of her own design, others stolen or bartered from Dominion engineers. She had adapted them all. Alien scalpels retrofitted with tactile grips. A bone weaver that used oscillating light to fuse cartilage. She didn't need perfect tools. She needed them to obey. Her first procedure that cycle was on a reptilian commando who had taken shrapnel across his abdominal core. Dominion med drones had sealed the entry wounds, but not the internal bleed that was slowly drowning his organs. Unia opened him up, fingers navigating alien musculature with practiced efficiency. As she worked, she whispered to herself, not prayers, but equations and trauma mnemonics. Her mind split neatly, one part calculating angles, the other measuring pain. The commando survived. She moved on. Hours passed in crimson rhythm. She didn't sleep, didn't speak. Only stitched, clamped, drained, grafted. By the end of the first full cycle, 10 patients had been stabilized. 2 had died, and one had whispered a word in his native tongue that translated roughly to curse-bearer. Varnock returned that night. He stood in her office, a hollowed-out supply room barely big enough for 2 people. Ice crystals gathered on the walls near his armored frame, reacting to his body's temperature regulation. He had removed his chest plate, revealing pale, translucent skin marked by radiant veins of energy. The incision she'd made days earlier had healed to a fine line, almost elegant. "You've rebuilt the ward," he said, nodding to the new arrangement of surgical stations. "I didn't ask for your approval." "No, but you have it." She gave him a hard look. "Why are you here?" "I've been assigned as your protection detail." "I don't need protection. I need autonomy." Varnock regarded her. "Among Dominion officers, you're now referred to as Scalpel Sovereign." It was not meant as flattery. "They fear your influence." Unia sat back, exhausted. "They should." Something shifted then, not in the room, but in the air between them. Not trust, not quite alliance, but the first shadow of shared interest. In the cycles that followed, Unia's ward transformed. Patients stopped resisting sedation. Word spread that the human medic's pain meant life, not punishment. She began modifying treatments, customizing implants for better mobility, mixing regenerative serums with anesthetics the Dominion had never considered. Her experiments saved more lives than entire regiments of war techs. And yet the cost mounted. She watched a child soldier die from a treatment she devised, his nervous system rejecting the augmentation. She logged it, adjusted her formula, and moved on. Guilt had no place here. It was a sharp edge that dulled under constant use. General Zarn visited her only once more during that period. He stood at the end of the recovery bay as Unia finished reconstructing the shattered limb of a cybernetic officer. She didn't look up when he approached. "You exceed expectation," he said. "I exceed your imagination," she replied. "Your name now appears in Dominion strategy logs. Entire units refuse deployment unless you are assigned to their zone." Unia tightened the suture. "I'm not a mascot." "No," Zarn said. "You are an asset, and assets require security." He handed her a datapad. On it were the schematics of a new facility, larger, more advanced, with her name encoded into the Access Authority. Unia scrolled through it slowly. "What's the catch? You'll be permitted to request materials, staff, and field access. In exchange, your data becomes Dominion property." She laughed, once bitter and sharp. "You want my mind now, too." "You've already given it. This formalizes the arrangement." She didn't answer him. She only powered down the datapad and set it aside. Later, in private, Varnock told her something that stayed with her. "They think they control you," he said, "but they've mistaken the scalpel for the hand that holds it." Unia didn't sleep that night. She walked the ward instead, listening to the machine's hum and the soft wheezing of patients suspended between agony and recovery. She realized something then, something terrible and true. She had power. Not the Dominion's kind, not explosive or strategic, but the kind that entered quietly, opened bodies, and rewrote futures. She could keep soldiers alive who were meant to die. She could restore minds dulled by trauma. She could create warriors the Dominion hadn't intended. And perhaps she could undo them, too. A patient, a Zalari scout, reached out as she passed. His arm trembled as he touched her sleeve. "You are not like the others," he rasped. "You fix what were breaks." She knelt, placed her fingers gently on his wrist. "I don't fix," she whispered. "I repurpose." He closed his eyes, and Unia stood. There was no need for gods in this place, only healers. And sometimes the difference was just a matter of intent. At the end of the cycle, she received her first formal request from Dominion Command, a live-streamed operation on a high-ranking commander, wounded in a failed planetary assault. The procedure would be viewed across the fleet, an example of Dominion resilience and human ingenuity united. Unia stared at the request for a long time, not because she doubted she could do it, but because she knew she could. She tapped the screen once. Request accepted. Then she set her tools to sterilize, sharpened the bone saw she designed from a mining laser, and whispered to herself, "Let them watch." The operation was a performance. That was the first thing Unia realized as the broadcast timer counted down above the sterilization field. She stood beneath the domed lights of her newly furnished surgical theater, now situated in the heart of Zalaxis Prime. The chamber had been constructed in less than a week, a miracle of Dominion efficiency or desperation. High Command insignia adorned every corner, and hollow cameras hovered like insects, their lenses dilated for drama. On the operating table lay High Commander Threx Vuller, a veteran of 100 planetary sieges, now reduced to shredded muscle, collapsed lung tissue, and a fused neural array barely keeping his higher cognition functional. His body was a battlefield. Unia would be both general and architect. Varnock stood nearby, armored again, his arms folded. He watched her prep the tools with quiet calculation. There was something new in his stance. Concern, perhaps, or reverence. Every breath he takes without surgical correction worsens his brain degradation, Unia said, mostly to herself. We should have done this 3 hours ago. High Command wanted maximum visibility. Varnock replied, You are no longer a healer, Unia. You are Dominion Theater. She didn't bother answering. Her focus narrowed to the field before her. The incision was clean, swift. She used a dual-beam scalpel, one side cauterizing, the other slicing with photon precision. A cloud of burnt tissue lifted into the filtered air, and robotic arms descended on command, holding the wounded commander's thorax open like the petals of some grotesque flower. Inside, everything pulsed in a regular staccato. Blood, bioelectric signals, the tremors of a dying war god. Unia navigated it all with composer's touch. Repair, realign, reprogram. Vuller's nervous lattice had to be stripped of old Dominion code and replaced with one of her design, one that could adapt, not just obey. It was treason by implication, but they had asked her to save him, not to save their version of him. She did. 6 hours later, Vuller was alive, breathing, conscious, staring at her with eyes no longer bound by Dominion protocol. He tried to speak, but she silenced him with a single gloved finger to his lips. Don't thank me, she said. Just understand. She turned to the cameras then and gave a nod. The feed cut to black. By the next day, her reputation reached myth. Dominion channels buzzed with praise. Human surgeon defies odds. Healer of steel and flesh. Soldiers carve her symbol into their armor, a crimson scalpel over a pulse line. But others whispered that Unia Kale could do more than save, that she could change what the Dominion created, that she might be more dangerous than any insurgency. And they were right. Her patients began returning to the front lines, faster and sharper than before. But their tactics changed. They moved with unfamiliar fluidity. They worked as units, not cogs. Some even ignored kill protocols, choosing subdual or capture. The Dominion attributed it to enhanced recovery. Unia knew better. She was rewriting their instincts, healing them into something less monstrous, something that might remember peace. That's when the first sabotage report came in. A Dominion cruiser detonated mid-jump, its engine ruptured from within. One survivor claimed the attack was no accident. It was coordinated by soldiers Unia had treated. They planted false telemetry, disabled fail-safes. It was treason. Unia reviewed the patient logs. She recognized the names. Varnock confronted her in the ward that night. His face was hard, expression unreadable. They're saying you engineered the descent. They healed, Unia replied. That's all I did. They disobeyed. They betrayed the Dominion. Maybe they finally saw something worth betraying it for. Varnock stepped closer, his voice low. You're playing with contagion. Not infection, thought. Dominion soldiers aren't built to question. You made them curious. I've made them whole. He stared at her for a long time. Then he asked, Was this your plan all along? Unia didn't answer. She moved past him toward the recovery bay. He followed. Inside, a Threxian female lay hooked to a neural bridge, eyes fluttering as data flooded her cortex. Unia adjusted the drip rate, careful to avoid pushing too fast. Her name's Sevi, she said quietly. She led a purge squad on Narthus 9. Burned half a city alive. She remembers every scream. Couldn't sleep. Asked me to take it away. And did you? No. I helped her carry it. Varnock exhaled, almost a sigh. You're creating rebels. I'm creating survivors. He didn't argue further. He stood there in silence until the lights dimmed for cycle shift. Unia returned to her quarters at night with her thoughts loud in her skull. She stared at the data streams on her console, recovery patterns, neural variants, combat efficacy curves. Every line confirmed it. Her methods were changing more than bodies. They were evolving minds. The next day, Dominion High Command summoned her. She entered the chamber flanked by guards. A long obsidian table awaited her, with spectral avatars of Dominion generals seated in projection. Their faces flickered, some reptilian, others chitinous, one little more than a swirl of mist contained in a glass cube. Dr. Kale, the lead avatar, began. Your results are extraordinary. Your loyalty, however, is in question. Unia didn't flinch. I've saved more soldiers than your last 3 campaigns combined, and altered them. Their compliance metrics are unstable. They're not machines. They're sentient beings. They are property. That word ignited something in her, a heat she hadn't felt in years. Then maybe it's time someone stole them. The avatars bristled. Alarms might have sounded if the chamber weren't sealed. You misunderstand your role, the lead said coldly. We raised you from prisoner to physician. You owe us. I owe you nothing. Varnock appeared at her side. His presence drew murmurs, static interference. Half fear, half confusion. She has protection, he said, and leverage. Unia placed a small chip on the table. This contains a complete data schema for the Vuller procedure, including neurological adaptation patterns. If anything happens to me, this spreads across every Dominion channel. Blackmail? One of them hissed. Insurance? She said. The chamber fell silent. Eventually, the lead nodded. Then you remain, for now. But know this, your freedom is contingent. You step too far and we erase you. Unia left without a word. Back in her ward, she scrubbed her hands slowly, methodically, watching the blood and synth fluid swirl down the drain. Varnock watched from the threshold. They'll come for you eventually, he said. I know. You've made enemies. I've made a choice. He approached, paused beside her. You could disappear. I could help you. Unia shook her head. Not yet. There's more work to do. He reached into his coat and pulled out a coded drive. Then you'll need this. It's access to the lower levels, where the abandoned biovaults are kept. She raised an eyebrow. Why? Because the Dominion doesn't just build soldiers. It archives failures. Unia took the drive, fingers brushing his. Then I guess it's time I learned from their mistakes. Outside, the ship's artificial dawn began to rise. A false sun in a false sky, shining down on a medic-turned myth, and a rebellion born not from weapons, but from healing. The descent into the lower levels of Zalaxis Prime felt like falling into forgotten organs of a dying god. Lights flickered and died behind Unia as she moved, her boots echoing through corridors layered in rust and centuries of silence. The air smelled of decay, not rot, but abandonment. Here, the Dominion buried what it no longer wanted to remember. She passed sealed doors with warning glyphs etched in blood red. Cracked viewports showed murky vats filled with malformed silhouettes, floating in nutrient sludge. Failed augmentations. War beasts that couldn't think or obey. Lives discarded like miswritten code. And in her hand, the drive Varnock had given her pulse with a quiet rhythm, unlocking doors not meant to open. She wasn't alone. Varnock walked at her side, silent, armed, not as protector anymore, but as co-conspirator. Whatever faith he had once placed in the Dominion had cracked in the shadow of Unia's defiance. He didn't say it aloud. He didn't have to. They reached the vault near the base of the dreadnought spine. The final lock resisted until Unia overrode it manually, repurposing surgical commands into access protocols. The door hissed open with a sound like something exhaling after centuries of being held. Inside, darkness stirred. Rows of capsules lined the chamber, each housing a figure suspended in cryostasis. Some human, some alien, others unclassifiable. Tags dangle from each pod with designations and failure notes. Cognitive drift, aggression lockout, soul rejection, Dominion terminology for subjects that refuse to conform. Unia approached one of the capsules. Inside floated a girl, no older than 15, with silver circuitry braided into her scalp. Her eyes were closed, but her face was serene. The note read, Prototype empath, terminated due to emotional overload. Unia tapped the glass lightly, her breath fogging against it. She could feel too much, she said softly. So they froze her. They fear what they can't control, Varnock said behind her. She turned to him. These aren't failures. They're truths. Each one is a path the Dominion couldn't follow, because it didn't serve conquest. Then what do we do? She hesitated. The plan that had lived in the back of her mind, unformed and dangerous, now bloomed with terrible clarity. We wake them. It took 6 days. 6 days of rewriting protocols, redirecting power conduits, bypassing Dominion failsafes, and reviving lives deemed too wild, too unprofitable to save. Not all of them survived the process. Some woke screaming and never stopped. Others faded before she could stabilize them. But those who endured, 5, then 9, then 13, looked at her not as a savior, but as a signal. They were broken. Yes, but so was she, and she'd found strength in that. Among the revived was Sevi, the Threxian soldier whose guilt had nearly destroyed her. When she learned of Unia's plan, she didn't hesitate. You gave me back my mind, Sevi said. Now let me use it. Unia gave her command of the lower wards, her own pocket battalion of recovered minds and defiant flesh. She wasn't building an army. She was cultivating resistance. Organic, adaptive, decentralized. A healing network with teeth. The Dominion noticed. The first strike came as a lockdown. Power to her clinic was cut. Communications were severed. Her patients were classified as hostile biologicals, and drones were deployed to isolate the zone. Unia had prepared for this. Varnock rerouted power from auxiliary systems. Sevi's squad disabled drones using sedative bursts and sonic scramblers, tools Unia had designed for surgery, now repurposed for subversion. No one died in the counterstrike. That was critical. They weren't fighting to destroy. They were fighting to heal the structure that sought to erase them. But it escalated quickly. An elite strike team was dispatched, a unit built from Dominion's newest NeuroSync soldiers, cybernetically linked for perfect unity. Unia recognized them. She had trained some of their biological prototypes. Now, they were hollow-eyed machines, governed by algorithms with no room for compassion. They stormed her ward at cycle break, breaching walls with seismic charges. Unia stayed in the surgical theater. She would not run. When the soldiers burst through the door, they found her unarmed, standing in the center of the room, hands open. I saved your predecessors, she said. Some of you bear implants I designed. Does that mean anything to you? They didn't answer. Their weapons remained steady. Then one, the smallest of the squad, hesitated. A flicker in his targeting alignment, a tremble in his grip. Unia saw it and spoke gently. Your name was Malin before they renamed you. You loved stargazing. You broke protocol once to save a civilian child on Viros. I remember, because you cried in my ward. His weapon lowered an inch. That was enough. Sevi struck from the shadows, stunning 2 soldiers. Varnock tackled the unit leader. The fight was brutal, silent, controlled chaos. And in the end, the neural sync was severed. The soldiers fell, not dead, disconnected. Unia knelt beside the one who'd hesitated, placing her hand over his chest. You are still human, she whispered, and that's your rebellion. After the battle, word spread beyond the dreadnought, across Dominion space. Soldiers with lingering pain, fractured memories, or doubts began to defect. Some sought Unia out. Others emulated her techniques. Underground clinics emerged, not as sanctuaries, but as schools. She became legend then, the medic queen, the Scalpel Sovereign, the healer who would not bow. Unia never claimed a title. She didn't want one. What she wanted was freedom, not for herself alone, but for the broken to rise without shame, for healing to be an act of war against erasure. And so she continued, surgery by surgery, soul by soul. One night, weeks later, Varnock entered her quarters. His armor was scuffed, his eyes tired. "They've issued your termination order," he said. "Full spectrum. You'll be hunted across the sector." Unia nodded, unsurprised. "Then I suppose," she said, "we make our move now." He stepped forward, offering her a data core. "Coordinates to an abandoned Dominion seed ship. Autonomous. Equipped for cryostasis, planetary seeding, and multi-species support. You want me to run? I want you to seed the future." Unia turned the core in her hands, its edges cool and smooth. "And what about you?" "I'll hold the line." She studied him. "You don't believe in God, do you?" "No. But you believe in me?" "Yes," he said, "because you gave people back to themselves." She smiled, tired but unbroken. Then she packed her tools. When the Dominion descended, Zalaxis Prime bled fire. Whole wings were vented to vacuum. Records erased. Laboratories burned. But Unia Kale was gone, vanished into the void with a ship full of lost souls and infinite chances. Some say she died. Others say she became something more, an echo in the stars, a myth carved in the scars of war. But those who bear her scalpel mark remember, not the pain, not the surgeries, but the way she looked at them and saw not weapons, not soldiers, but people, and in that seeing made them whole again,